Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from On Thorns I Lay, self-titled On Thorns I Lay, out October 13th on Season of Mist. The album has 6 tracks, 43 minutes in length, and this is the band's 10th full-length studio album. They are a Greek Gothic Doom metal band. And as you would expect from a Gothic Doom metal band, this album is very balanced, it's very compact. I would say at times it's even quite dense. When you go through these 6 songs, the experience that you get at the end is one of a record that never really lost its shape. It doesn't have a lot of ebbs and flows. It doesn't really change its routines. It stays on a very linear path. Just because it does all of that, it doesn't mean that the album becomes boring, repetitive, or even redundant. They added certain elements or changed certain elements within the songs in order for you to feel like the tracks are taking you in different directions, even though the starting point and the finish line is quite the same for each and every single song. It's the journey within them that changes, and this is enough to make the album have a certain playability to it, but more important, becoming a really immersing experience. With every step that you take, with every song that you listen to, you feel like you're sinking into this record more and more. It has a very welcoming sound, and it's melancholy in what it offers, and those ebbs and flows and those different journeys that each and every single song provides really captivates the listener and allows this record to be one that's not necessarily easy to digest, but it's enjoyable to digest. Now, as far as the sound is concerned, this record has that dark, gothic, doomy vibe from beginning to end, but it's very rich, super layered, extremely textured, great production behind it, and I don't think this album would work without that great production that allows you to see the different layers in the sound, the different dynamics in the sound, and see all the nuances that they added to these songs in order for that path, in order for that journey within them to be quite different from track to track, even though the overall experience stays pretty much balanced throughout. One of those elements is definitely the guitars. I love the fact that on the most part of this record, on most songs on this album, the guitars have this great duality to them. On one hand, they're providing a sense of heaviness, a sense of togetherness, really creating some sort of foundation that the drums help define. And then on top of that, sometimes you have either a more driven sound, a more penetrating sound, a more melancholic sound that really puts its stamp on the experience, on the mood, on the atmosphere of the song, or you have the guitars coming over the top with a lot more thickness, with a lot more heaviness, making the song feel a lot bigger. Like if this wasn't enough as far as the guitars are concerned, you have the added elements of using acoustic guitars, which changes the mood, it changes the perception, it strips down the emotion and the songs and allows you to really feel that emotion. This is an album that's dripped in it, and those acoustic moments help the listener understand it, feel it, and connect with it. The other part of the guitars that I thought was really interesting, specifically when it comes to that more emotional side, are the guitar solos. This album has incredible solos. You just are almost mesmerized by how bright, how beautiful they are, how welcoming they are. They play a role also in creating that sense of songs that really bring you in, like that immersive experience. A lot of that also becomes a little bit more noticeable in terms of how the solos not just impact the songs, but impact the experience that they offer. And I felt like every single track had a solo that went against the grain of the song. It doesn't matter if the track is more melancholic, it doesn't matter if the track was more heavy. The solos always felt like loosening those chains, either the chains of melancholy or the chains of heaviness. Either one of them really drags you down. So the solos felt a little bit more free, they felt a little bit looser, and they increased the depth and the volume that the songs had, working still well and connected still well with the other experience that the track gives, always merging with a guitar sound that was either heavy or melancholic in the backdrop while the solos are happening. But it's undoubtable that the solos really increase the size of these songs and go against the grain, against the DNA of every single track, but in a very positive way, in a very impactful way. So this is an album that has a lot of different sides, specifically when it comes to the guitar sound, And that's where you're going to see most of the mobility of the album. That's where you're going to see most of the dynamic elements of the record, is in how rich guitar-wise this album is and how much they did with the same tools. Then you have the drums. Like I said, the drums work really well in partnering it up with the heavier side of the guitar sound, creating that bass, creating that foundation. But the drums are not uniform either. They don't have just one linear path that they take from beginning to end. I like the fact that the splashing of the cymbals really creates also depth within the drum sound, because it allows the drums to be heavy, to be thick, to have a sense of oomph, to be the chains that holds those tracks down. But then when you're splashing the cymbals, you create a little bit more depth and you allow the drum sound to feel grounded but loose at the exact same time. A very similar dynamic that we see with the guitars when it comes to that heavier experience and then having brighter solos or having more melancholic driven melodies. So you see the same paradigm in the guitar sound as you see in the drum sound, creating that rich experience all around as far as the sonic output of this record is concerned. Perhaps the only element that stays a little bit more grounded, that stays a little bit more consistent, a little bit more linear, is the vocals. But I honestly don't want much more out of it than that darkness, that pain, that despair, that emotion to come forward, and how those heavy vocals come across and how they impact the songs. One thing I noticed is that they always carried the movement of the track really well. They don't change. It's not like you're going to get a dynamic range here vocally. No, it's very grunty, it's very low, it's very connected, but they always felt on par with the movement of the track, the mood of the track, and the atmosphere of the track. So they might change how they become or how they deliver and the impact that they have within the song, but how they come across stays very connected, stays very much the same throughout. All around, a beautiful sounding album. The more you listen to it, the more you get from it. It's one of those records that I think it's never gonna get old, because it has that ability to give the listener something new to discover with every single time you play it. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Crestfallen. The acoustic opening of this song is really interesting because it's not just there as an add-on, if you will. It's there in a way that it connects to the rest of the melody that the track is going to carry forward, just with a little bit more volume, with a little bit more heaviness, with a little bit more melancholy. That opening, that acoustic stripped down opening, has a little bit of a folky influence. The sound comes across grounded in folk influences. And that's not just true of this song, that's true of every single time they decided to go with a more acoustic approach and they stripped down the tracks. It always felt it more connected, more ethnically connected, if you will, to a much different experience than what you were getting from the rest of the sound, from the rest of the guitars, from the rest of the drums, and even the vocal performance. You notice it in this track, but it's not just present in this song alone. Now, this is a track that the vocals help create that sense of heaviness, matching the methodic approach that the sound has, and then there's a few jolts vocally, very subtle jolts here and there that just kind of spike on the richer scale, if you will. It spikes a little bit, going above that more linear movement that they normally put forward. The drums have a ton of life on this track. They bring a lot of heaviness as well, not consistently, but on and off, on and off. When they're heavy, they're really heavy. When they're not as heavy, they're still impactful, but in a different way. The atmospheric, stripped down, piano-led interlude, outstanding. You break the song in the middle, you change the dynamic, you completely reset the listener, because you're going from something a little bit more dense and a little bit more voluminous to something completely naked, completely open and fragile, if you will, and then you bring it back again by moving it into a guitar solo, into a great guitar experience that leads into a guitar solo that really gives you a little bit more life, a little bit more energy. It's almost like you walked through this cave and finally there was the light at the end of the tunnel. There's a little bit of that, of simplicity, but still being very complex in how it's put forward. Great track all around. Now the next one is Among the Wolves, and the interesting thing about this song is that it kind of finishes with a very similar experience as Crestfallen started, and those tracks are back to back, so it almost feels like, you know, part one and part two, if you will. Not that it's the same melody, but it has the same elements, so it's a nice way of bookending these two songs and having them back to back. Now this is a much darker, heavier sounding song. It moves a lot slower. It's definitely more methodic, more melancholic as well. It has great undertones. It also has great atmospheric pieces that add a lot more. It makes the song feel a lot richer, but richer from an atmospheric point of view, not necessarily from a sonic standpoint. It also helps the overall density of this track. It helps the texture of this track. It allows it to be a little bit easier to digest, a little bit easier to process, and then it reaches its most highest point of clarity once it gets into the solo. The solo section is beautiful. It levitates the track. It really lifts it up. It releases all the chains that this song has, and this song has a lot of chains on it because it feels like it's just not going anywhere. You feel like you're walking in quicksand, so with every step that you take, you're actually moving less. You're actually getting deeper and deeper in it. This track has a lot of that. And then, like I said, closing off in a very stripped down environment, and in a very stripped down sound. It kind of reminded me of how Crestfallen had started. Last but definitely not least, Raise Empires. This is a bigger sounding track. It's one of those that there's definitely not any chains on it. It feels loose. It's still heavy. It still has big sound, but it has this big volume. It's a song that definitely doesn't feel like it's squeezed into a box. It has a lot of layers, very texture. It has a brighter guitar sound. It also has a heavier, dense guitar sound. But the brighter guitar sound that comes in waves really thins out the experience. It doesn't allow your perception of the song to be one that is just like complete thickness to it. It allows this track to be big, to have volume, but that volume is easy to cut through and is not necessarily super compact in it. That more brighter melody, like I said, that it weaves its way through it, really helps the song become bigger, brighter, but also easier to connect with. It has a great solo, shouldn't be a surprise, and that solo comes at the end, completing the track perfectly. This is it on Thorns I Lay, self-titled On Thorns I Lay, on October 13 on Season of Mist. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.